All
right. Halito, everyone. Welcome back to Choctaw Tisholi. Sahotepwa Megan Baker, and I'm a research associate here in Historic Preservation. This week, we have our Historic Preservation Research Group, which is a bubbly bunch, as you can see on your screen today. So our research group includes Kate Black, Francine Locke Ray, Michael Bray, Sandra Riley, and Gary Spring. They are a group of genealogists, historians, just local Choctaws and non-Choctaws who help us kind of learn about our Choctaw past. And so they are such experts in everything that they kind of do, and they might say that they're not, but they most certainly are. And so we lean on them in our historic preservation office to learn more about the different kinds of parts of our history. So it's a team of me, Ryan Spring, and Byram, who are also on the call today. So yeah, and so we're just going to kind of go around and get to know how people got involved with research, because I know a lot of you out there want to learn more about Choctaw history and how you can learn about your family, how to do kind of genealogy work. And so these are the people who also kind of started out as a hobby, and then it kind of became a lot more than that. So they have a lot that you can learn from today. So why don't we just kind of first start off with everyone telling a little bit about themselves and where they're from. We'll kind of start with Francine today.
Hi, everyone. I'm originally from Chicago, but my father's family came from Antlers, Oklahoma. I worked for 30-some years for a psychiatrist. Some people say that was quite the place I should have been, but learned through him a lot about research and how to do research, certainly filing research, and then for most of my life, I've just been interested in doing historical and genealogical research. And in 2012, I moved permanently to Antlers from Indianapolis, Indiana, and the big push was to come back to where my family was, to where, even though we really physically didn't have a presence, I felt this was home, to come back to Antlers. And it was, as far as the research, it's the best thing that we ever did, because we've learned so much, by just being on site and being able to get to the records that are available down here. So, okay, you want to talk to yourself?
Didn't expect that one, so. But yeah, my family is actually from Indianapolis, Indiana. I sort of left Indianapolis, joined the Air Force, and spent time in North Dakota, and then Japan, Thailand, Korea. Anyway, I came back, worked at Rolls-Royce a little bit, but I continually worked on aircraft and aircraft engines and development. So, but yeah, my research with Francine didn't start until I met her. That's 52 years ago.
52 years ago, yeah.
But we didn't. That's when I first heard about Choctaws, and then I thought I married a Choctaw Indian princess. So.
Little did he know.
I know, yeah, but anyway, Fran took me along for a lot of her research and everything, and I got interested in newspapers, and I really enjoy the newspapers. So, but from there on, we've been doing that and transcribing and just continuing. So, but it's been interesting. I really enjoyed it. So.
Next. Sandra or Kay? Who wants anything else? Sandra?
Okay.
Go ahead, Sandra. It's your turn.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sandra Riley. I'm Choctaw and Chickasaw. after removal, my family settled in the Wheelock area. My mother attended Wheelock School, and over the years, she told many stories, which I'm sure influenced my interest in genealogy and history. I was in the Air Force for several years, and at one time I was stationed in Greenville, Mississippi. But at that time, I did not know that that was part of the Choctaw homeland, and it would have been good to know then, but it was a fun experience anyway. After that time, sometime after that, I lived on the Navajo Reservation for 25 years. I was able to take Native American history classes on the reservation, and many of those classes were given in Navajo, and I had to find me a translator to understand what was being said, but it was all very interesting, and it was a wonderful time. It was on the northern border, and it was open range back then, and it was, I did a lot of research into, but it was very difficult doing. And then after that, we moved to Northeast Texas, and that's where I've spent the past 20 years, and close to the border of Oklahoma, so I can zip over in an hour. So that's my history.
Go ahead, Kay.
Oh, I'm Kay Black. I was born at Jumbo in northwest Pushmataha County. I spent a number of years overseas working for the U.S. government in the foreign aid program in the Middle East, the Far East, and Africa. And with a slight sojourn in Australia before coming to California and finally to Connecticut and back to Oklahoma. I've been a family genealogist since the mid-1970s. And when I moved back to Oklahoma, I got into local history. And that's my main thing at the moment.
You're up, Gary.
Okay. My name is Gary Spring. I currently live in Tallahena, which is up in the northeast portion of Choctaw Nation Reservation here in Oklahoma. I have a degree in geography with a minor in history. I spent 20 years active in reserve of the United States Marine Corps and worked for 25 years with the U.S. Geological Survey, ending up being supervisory cartographer, and made a lot of those digital elevation models and aerial maps off the topography maps before we started contracting those out. I've always had an interest in history and family genealogy, and I've got a library at home now that I developed over the years that's almost 2,000 volumes. So I do collect books, and a lot of them are Choctaw related or Southeastern Native related. I've been working with family genealogy for my family for quite a while. And I'm a member of Choctaw Nation, and my family is originally from the what is now the Hugo area in South Choctaw Nation.
Awesome. And then Ryan and Jennifer, feel free to tell a little background about yourselves and what you specialize in.
Who's gonna go?
Ryan, it's all you.
Gonna go? Okay, fine. So my name is Ryan Spring. Like my dad, Gary said, our family's from the what is now the Hugo, Oklahoma area. Yeah, I've been working for Choctaw Nation for about the last 10 years now. I've served as a GIS specialist. I've served as the director, and now I serve as an archaeological technician. So I've been around and been doing research on Choctaw history and culture now for the last 10 years. Been learning from everyone here. Been learning from Ian and Les and just, you know, all these different community members. So it's definitely been a blessing to learn from them and be able to take that information and use it to protect our sacred sites, our archaeological sites, our structures, all the things that our ancestors have left for us to learn from today. So, yeah, I currently live in Calera, Oklahoma with my beautiful wife, Kathia, and my two nieces, Amaya and Kinsley. And if COVID lifts, I'll get back to playing some Choctaw stickball as well.
Really quickly, I'm Jennifer Byram. I am also from the Chicago area, but my dad's family is from Bennington, where his mother grew up. And I worked for the Historic Preservation Department for almost 5 years. And I'm really more interested, very interested in textiles and materials, but got to learn so much from this group and really more just humbled by their knowledge and experience and getting to learn from them in the archives and have fun. So now I'm based out of Tucson, Arizona, where I'm working on a PhD in archaeology. But I'm just here to have a good time with these really, really super knowledgeable folks.
Thanks, everyone. And I guess a little background on me is that my family comes from Baptiste. I grew up in California, but we always kind of came to Oklahoma, and I've always kind of known that. And I'm working on a dissertation about Choctaw and US laws. And so I do a lot of archival research. And so when I got to actually meet the research group for the first time, I was so blown away by the amount of knowledge that they had, because I read a lot of stuff, but they read far more stuff. And so they're really wonderful kind of people to learn and spend time with. And so it's been really awesome learning from them. And so that leads us right into our next kind of question. And so how did each of you kind of get involved with researching Choctaw history? And how did that even get you to introduce yourselves to each other? I know you guys touched a little bit about it, but would love to hear a little bit more about how you got started. And we'll start again with Francine.
Okay, I am Choctaw, and what was interesting to me is as a child, we didn't talk, my parents and grandmother did not talk much about the Choctaw people and being Choctaw. It wasn't until a great aunt had passed that became part of our lives. And I was always so curious and asked questions, was told people don't ask those questions, but don't let that deter any of you, if you want to do family research. Ask those questions. Because eventually the people go and then they're gone, the questions. But it was my father-in-law who first got me into actually doing genealogy. He asked for help with his, and it was surprisingly a distant cousin or something of his who lived in Oklahoma, a Bray in Oklahoma, who wanted help with her research on the Bray side. But then what I think in the final thing which really got me going was my dad had met Bill Welge at Oklahoma History Center, and I started corresponding with him about the Choctaw research, about Choctaw history, and he one day said, I have this journal that I think you'd be interested in. And it turned out my great-great-grandfather, Thompson McKinney, had actually kept a journal in the early 1850s. And the copy had made its way to the Oklahoma Research Center, and Bill sent that to me. And here he was, Thompson in the journal was writing his biography. And for Choctaw, to me that was just amazing, because when I first started, I did take a couple of classes in genealogy, and one of the things they told us was every family thinks they have an Indian princess, and there just really isn't that much out there. So, it might not be worth your while to search your Indian history if you think you have some. And, but that was in the early 70s. And our research group and individually, we found it's just everywhere, you know. There's lots and lots of stuff out there, you know. But I felt exceptionally blessed and lucky to have had that journal come my way. And he wrote it, starts it with, I was born in, I think 1818, but at least I was born. You know, it's obvious I was born. But he did an interesting thing that you may find. He never mentioned the names of his parents. His mother had remarried and married an Isaac Nelson. And he mentions Isaac Nelson's name, and he gives a roadmap to his father's name. But it took research to find out who his father was. And eventually I did. And then that led to researching, for Thompson's sake, the Choctaw Academy in Kentucky, because he talks about going to the school in Kentucky, you know, and I thought, oh, that's not far from Indianapolis. Let's just do a road trip. And that in itself was an adventure. So that was pretty much how I got started. And after that, it becomes a passion and obsession. That's it. Now, we all met in different ways. Well, not really too much. Kay and Sandra and I really communicated by email years before we each met individually. But then we made the efforts to meet each other. And, of course, we started talking about families. And I think we're all related. We all, we keep finding more connections as we go, you know. So, well, I'll let somebody else.
I really didn't get started until I met Francine, and she mentioned the road trips, and one of the first ones we did was cemeteries, you know, and then we went to Kentucky, found the Choctaw school, and then I never forget the time going to a place in Oklahoma and finding the cemetery out in the cow pasture, you know. I said, you know, in the middle of all the cows, here's a cemetery that we're looking at, you know. So it's amazing that where this, how it started, and then I enjoyed all of it because I've been to places I never seen before, and then went on to once we got down here, she continued her research, and I just tagged along, and eventually got into, like I said, newspapers, and enjoyed the newspapers, and it just kept going, kept growing. So, but it's been enjoyable doing all that. So, but been to places I've never been before. So
learned a lot.
You learn a lot, and then you learn how to get the information.
Yeah.
So, that's all I have.
Well, my oldest memory is of my grandmother when I was 2. She was taking care of me while my mother was working. It was of us walking down this dirt road with a bucket, going down to the well to pump water, and then going back to the house. And all I can remember really is seeing her skirt swish beside me, but it was all a good memory. And when I was around 10, I spent the summer with my great aunt in Valiant. And we would walk down the road, and she would point out this house, and she'd say, that's where I was raised, that's where I was born, this is how we lived. And we'd be walking down to her brother's house to spend the evening and sitting in the yard and snapping beans. And I'd listen, and she would show me pictures, and she had pictures of my mother when she was in school at Wheelock, and I've never seen those pictures again. So but I've always been interested in it and interested in family history, and I'd like to listen. But mainly it was my mother's story of Wheelock. I had mentioned that after removal they had settled there. Well, my mother went to school there 100 years later. And then 100 years after that, I came across some of the papers that emphasized the stories that she had told me about Wheelock. So it's all coming around, and it's been a wonderful journey. And Francine has said how we had met, and I met Kay at the depot where she worked, and so it's all been a great journey. And being part of this research group has been fantastic, and led to wonderful finds. It's been great. Okay.
Um, I got started really in 1974. Well, before that, I used to write to a great aunt, and I was always interested in family history. But when I asked my dad, where do we come from, all I heard was Middle Tennessee, because that's probably all he knew. And my mother didn't know very much about where her ancestors had come from either, but it turned out they were also from Tennessee. But when I moved back to Oklahoma, I sent in my life membership to the Pushmataha County Historical Society before I moved. And once I had a house built and settled, I got involved. And of course, being local, we got lots of queries of, who's buried where, and can I get grandma's obituary, etc. And we had nothing to help anyone. So I had to dig into local history in order to be able to help people. And I've been doing that ever since, for years and years and years. And it's been a lot of fun. And when I think of how I met all these people, it's been through the depot for the most part, because that was kind of a common meeting place. And we've become good friends and family. That's all I have to say for now.
So I'm up, I guess. Let me step back a second. I did not know much about Choctaw family history until being an adult. I grew up, was born and raised in California. My grandfather, when my father was still young, had moved from Oklahoma via Texas, Arizona to California. So then when he got married and started raising a family, we were in California. And so I don't have the experience as some of the other folks do as far as growing up in a Choctaw oriented family, getting, family information firsthand from folks that you're growing up with. It wasn't until moving back here after I retired that, and it was my dad particularly getting involved with remeeting cousins and such in the area, particularly down in Hugo, that drew me back into doing family research along the Choctaw lines. And I found that fairly fascinating, because ultimately I found that my grandfather, who was an original enrollee, is the reason why I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. But our roots go back to Mississippi. And in fact, our family was one of the first ones in the first migration from Mississippi to Indian Territory, and ended up settling down in the Goodland area, which now is an area outside Hugo. So through my dad's initial reconnecting with family and getting a genealogy base, from that I was able to start exploring family connections. And then, as Ryan will probably explain more of, when he got more involved working with Choctaw Nation, I started getting educated from him as far as Choctaw culture and a lot of other things that I had never experienced growing up. So for me, it's been an interesting late in life, in a sense, experience to learn all of these wonderful things about the tribe I'm a member of, and define about family history and such, and how interconnected, like Francine mentioned, we seem to be related. And sometimes when I look at my genealogy base, and I think, at least by marriage, I'm related about half of Choctaw Nation, it seems, because we keep running into a lot of common names that go back there, because we've been such a close-knit tribe for a long time. Oh, do I also discuss how we met? That's part of what we're going to do here. I guess we didn't. I'm kind of the last member of this group to really become a member of it. And it's all basically through my son, again. He introduced me to Francine. and to Michael. I met Sandra a little bit differently because we were doing similar genealogy research, and through a friend of hers that she steered me to Sandra for a particular common family connection that we had, that I interacted with her until finally Ryan introduced me years later to her at one of our famous Labor Day festivals we have down at Tuskahoma yearly. And then finally, when we started meeting at the depot, I met Kay. And Kay's been a real godsend for a lot of my research as well, too, with family connections, because she is very detailed, very knowledgeable, and where to go look. And it's been very, very helpful. Francine, of course, is a very inspiration anyway for me all the time. I mean, she's, you know, she's our leader of the group de facto, if you want, Melvin, and she kind of keeps us together, keeps us directed where we're going to go. And it's been a blessing to know all four of those individuals. And then as far as Megan and that other lady who doesn't want to hang around here now, she's down in Tucson. Oh, it's been a real pleasure meeting both of you in recent times, and I look forward to having you both with us for a long, long time. I know you may end up with other areas that you want to go to, but it's been a real pleasure, Jennifer, and it's been a pleasure, Megan, to have met you both.
Absolutely.
And of course, I love my son.
Oh, thank you, Gary. So then, Ryan, could you tell us a little bit about how this group kind of became a kind of official group, and a little bit about that history?
Sure. So a number of years ago, during Intertribal Council, our department would attend ITC meetings with the other tribes. And there was a representative from the United States Marshals Museum. They were trying to get this Marshals Museum built in Fort Smith. And they wanted to work with the Eastern tribes in Oklahoma on dedicating a part of the museum to light horsemen. So they asked us, can you help us get a list of all of your native light horsemen, so that we can kind of put them on a mural or a plaque or something, and then some great stories about some of those light horsemen that we can put in the exhibits. And I'm like, sure, yeah, we'll just throw that together. Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, we could do that. So I was sitting there racking my brain. I'm like, how are we going to do this? I mean, this is such a huge endeavor. And so I got to thinking, so at that time, some of us in the department, we got together. And yeah, I think that's when I had talked to Francine about it. And I said, Francine, do you have an interest in this? She's like, sure. And then from there, it kind of, you know, spread to the, you know, the depot. And I had worked with Francine. I'd worked with Sandra and Michael before in the past, and Kay. And I said, well, let's, do you think you can put a team together and we could, maybe do some research in your off time? And that's kind of what happened is we all got together and we started meeting and started talking, who has this information, started putting it together and realized nothing out there. We're like, okay, let's try to find some stuff. So we'd go on some research trips here, research trips there, and then we finally hit the mother lode at the Oklahoma History Center. But yeah, no, it's just been, it was a fun project. It's still a continuing project, but the project, spread from there. So, it started out as this, project with light horsemen, and then it kind of turned into, okay, well, if we're going to these collections and these archives, let's just not get light horseman stuff. Let's, get Choctaw stuff that's there too. Because I said, while we're visiting, we might as well get a little bit of everything. And the whole reason for that is because our department had a database of historical and cultural information. So if we take these documents and scan them in and put it into this, well, we're hoping to build this archive to give to Cultural Center when the Cultural Center opened. And to us, that was like, oh, that's in the distance. It'll happen in the future. And now we're sitting in the Cultural Center. I'm going, look at all this stuff we put together over the years. And I can't wait because, there's a lot of great stuff that we've collected over the years that I think will really help a lot of Choctaw people and Oklahoma community, American community people, with different aspects of history and culture and genealogy. So I'm really excited about it. But that's how that all started, was the U.S. Marshals Museum, Light Horseman research.
Yeah, and I want to kind of add for people who might not be familiar with archives and that kind of research. Choctaw Nation is really unique in that it has so much kind of archival material, and a lot of it is in English, a lot of it is in Choctaw, because Choctaws actually, they learned English and writing really early on, and so they kind of created a lot of documents that other tribes that don't have a kind of written tradition, or like didn't gain a written tradition as early as we did. So they have a lot less kind of documents. And so and Ryan kind of said, like, there are archives everywhere. Like there are documents everywhere. So you could go to Yale. There's a bunch of like missionary records that you have. There's a lot of stuff at Oklahoma History Center, the Western History Collection at OU, at the Gilcrease. The Peter Pitchling collection at the Gilcrease is like one of their largest archival collections. And Peter Pitchling was like one of the most famous and prolific Choctaw chiefs, and who did a negotiated removal and kind of all these really important parts of history. And so it's just kind of, I just wish people could understand the amount of like work that there is, that like even our little group as a team can't all kind of handle and tackle down. And that's not even like mentioning things at the National Archives, like it's really everywhere, and it's really amazing. And I wish there was always more young Choctaws who wanted to become historians. So if this interests you, I'm telling you now, there's plenty of stuff.
And, a lot of people have been calling the tribe for years going, hey, do you have information on this? And what people don't realize is that all of our records, our government records, were seized from us in 1907. So, and they were taken and they were put in Muskogee for a long time in a dusty attic until the National Archives created the OHS, Oklahoma Historical Society, to house those in OKC, in Oklahoma City. So, we get a lot of phone calls, and I'm like, well, we just don't have that information. And it's still heartbreaking to have to say we don't have that information, as the third largest tribe in, the U.S. and, with such an expansive historic preservation department, it's hard that we don't have that research. And that's why, in the past, Ian Thompson was like, let's start putting something together. And so that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, like those the Oklahoma historical records, like that is, I think, like about 130 or something rolls of microfilm. And I can tell you about microfilm because she works with them a lot. But there are so many thousands of documents that go on one roll of microfilm. But does anyone else actually want to say anything about maybe the OHS records to help people kind of understand what kind of stuff we're talking about or looking at when we're doing research?
I'd say it's endless at OHS. There's so much there, and they hadn't even found it all. And my favorite story with the OH, other than the journal, is the Choctaw ledgers. And we had been there one trip, and then Bill Welge, again, one of my best friends, had called and said, I think Tammy, his assistant, I think she found something you're looking for. And it turned out that she found on a back shelf all the Choctaw Nation treasurers' ledgers from the 1840s through to statehood. And we were allowed to come in and photograph all these books and are working on transcribing them. And to me, that was just an archivist's dream, to come across something like that and be able to go and look at it and copy it And we've been working, like COVID was real good for that, because we've been working on transcribing. And hopefully at some point, if we get them all done, if you say, hey, I think my grandfather was treasurer, but not sure when, it'll be able to be found. Because the ones that especially Kay has done, she's done more of the listings. You just go to the Excel file and plug in Coleman E. Nelson, and it brings up everything that he's done, you know, that he got paid for. And it even tells you how much. Teachers got, what, about $10 for pay? I mean, they didn't get paid a whole lot in those days, because this is the 1800s. But to me, that was such a treasure trove of information, and we haven't even hardly touched it. We were working on the Chief's files. We've done some work on that. Michael's done work on interviews. You know, it's just endless. But we were so curious, we had to go to other archives too. So we just keep looking and looking. But I was going to add to that is that one of the things you find when you start this is you learn so much that you didn't know before. And one of the surprises that we have touched on, we weren't able to, but the others did, is the Choctaws in Louisiana. You know, I never really realized what a big group of Choctaws there were in Louisiana. And the group went to, I think it was, I'm not sure what town. We couldn't go at the time, but the rest of them went to do research in Louisiana. And I know Sandra keeps saying, we have to go back, we have to go back. So, but it leads you, one thing leads you to another, and Sandra brought back a book she had bought, and I never would have thought that there was a biography of a Catholic priest who actually, his whole commitment as a priest was to ministering to the Choctaws in the 1800s. And, you know, I'm Catholic. I never knew that. You know, nobody ever talked about the Catholics having a presence. It was always the Presbyterians and Methodists. So, anyways, I've talked too much. Somebody else gets to say something.
Yeah, the projects, I couldn't decide which one would be the most particular, but like the Light Horseman, you know, if you live back in those days and how they lived, and if you was unlawful, you know, you don't want to meet a Light Horseman. They're these judge, jury, and executioner, you know, so you don't want to meet these guys, really. You know, then we went on to Fran's family member had he was involved in the 1st National Guard in about 1912 or so. And that got us into World War I a little bit, and we followed him into as far as we could, you know, as far as the military. But that got me involved with the code talkers, you know, did a little research on the code talkers, you know. Then you mentioned the books that we all was taking photographs of all these different books, you know, and just amazing, you know, that they survived all this time like they've been, you know, and no one ever touched them for all these years. And that's the first time anybody went through the books, you know. So each one of these programs has been interesting, and you you hate to stop off that to go on to something else, you know. And it's just so interesting to see it, you know, and then do it. And plus you get to travel with it too, you know, because the traveling down Mississippi. I've never had any reason to go to Mississippi, but it sure was interesting, though, you know. So it's just learn what it was like back in the days. So, but it's been a lot of fun. So that's all.
Anyone want to add anything else about the Light Horseman project? Or
I would like to add, when we were working on the Light Horse, we were trying to figure out, you know, how did these people get paid and all that, and that was in some of the ledger books. And they'd actually be classified as Light Horse. Otherwise, you know, it would just be a name, and And so many of these people just had one name. So we don't know who they are in today's world. Except once in a while, I know Sandra at one point got an email from a person that told her ancestor's name, his English name, and then his Choctaw name, and that was wonderful to have at least one translation of a name. So, but it was interesting and fun.
You know, what's really interesting about some of these collections that you go to is, you know, we may go to, you know, Ian and I went to Montgomery a little, you know, years ago, and found the unpublished Halbert manuscript there, which has just been amazing for our department, and hopefully we can get that out soonish to everyone. But, you know, then, you know, a lot of collections they have an index, a very detailed index of what's there. But that's something that the Choctaw National Records don't have. They have a very incomplete index. So no one knows what's there, you know, and you know, and I guess that's the the beauty behind it all is that there's so much potential. And the biggest thing about that collection that I just love is when I got to go up and spend a day or two up there with everyone, and we're looking at one of the ledgers, and it had all the chiefs' speeches for when they did the address to the nation every year. And to me, that was amazing. You know, that's you know, a chief talking about, you know, all the things that are going on that year, you know, the issues that they're having, and, you know, how the tribe's gonna, you know, get through that. And it's amazing, because I just kind of imagined, you know, anytime we have a new, you know, elected official within Choctaw Nation, for them to have access to those things, to understand what previous leadership has been through and what future leadership will have. And, you know, to me, that was just something amazing, and something that, you know, people don't have access to right now, that I wish that our people did. So I don't know. I love that collection, and I really hope that one day it'll be accessible to everyone. It's just going to take a little bit of work.
Yeah, I think one of the things that boggles my mind is that you have these documents produced by Choctaw people, but no historian has really kind of spent the time with it. And it's the kind of documents that a historian would love to like kind of write about. But it kind of seems like no one actually like cares what Choctaw Nation was doing between 1830 and 1898. And like Angie DeBow talks a little bit about it, but she mostly uses government documents, and she doesn't actually use these national documents. And there's so many kinds of stories in that, just the OHS collection, and not even thinking about other ones. And so it's pretty wild and why we would love more researchers to kind of work through this, and that's why we're trying to transcribe it and makes it kind of accessible for everyone.
Now, one of the things I transcribed was the letter from the ledgers, which is really interesting. It's Choctaws in the United States, the Confederate United States Treaty, you know. And I said, man alive, you know, just think about that, you know. And of course, it goes in detail about the stuff that's supposed to be done, not done, you know. But it's just amazing that a written document still exists like that. So that was a letter.
So what are some other projects that the research group has worked on? I know everyone kind of like has a specialty, like what's really nice about this group is everyone specializes in different kinds of things. People have different kinds of interests. And so everyone kind of is able to really hone in on a specific topic and really be an expert on it. And then it's kind of like when we all get together, we can kind of share and learn from one another. But I would love to hear about some of the different projects that you've worked on since that initial Light Horseman project. And everyone could talk a little bit like what they're most interested in, or like what periods of Choctaw history or subjects do you like the most? So Francine?
Oh, I have to start again? I was thinking, God, what is it? I like it all. But I, I just love it all. Just send it my way. What I like to do, I'm a trained archivist, and I really love to get into the archives and get into the individual files, or I'm spacing it to what you call it, but like the chief's files, to read through those. And initially we started reading through them, looking for information and what the light horsemen were doing during what were, those chiefs having the light horsemen do and all that. But that's where, because to me, that's where I find all the stuff that you don't normally see elsewhere, is when you go to an archive and here's this box they bring you and it's full of uncharted material, and that's so much what I think research is. It's a search, a history, the Peter Pitchlynn papers. I still want to go back and do more with the Peter Pitchlynn papers, because that was just amazing to see the letters that, the correspondence that people were following 150 years ago, 1830s, 1840s, and all through there, you have a whole history in just the Peter Pitchlynn papers alone. But then I keep finding extra, like just today, Megan said, oh, have you seen the Patrick Hurley papers in the Western History Collection? And then she says, he and Victor Locke, which I knew were good friends, but there's a whole bunch of correspondence. So right away it was, oh my God, I have to go to the Western History. I've been there, but I hadn't done that because it was a short trip. And then when the research group went, we didn't get to go. But to me, that's my favorite thing, is just anything you can find, I want to find it, So that's what I like to do. That's mine, is getting into the archives, and looking there. But then, and I've interviewed people, because that's part of it, is to interview people and trying to catch the elders and get their stories. So, okay, who's next?
Talking about the elders, that was the one thing I did in OHS. There's a card catalog I went into. And card catalog is just people that have been here in 1870, came in from different states in 1870s and 1850s, I guess, and how they got here and what they find and what was it like, and man, the hardships they had, back then, that was, and then you read that, and then when I went into newspapers and everything, you get the stories in the newspapers a little bit. But then it's kind of off the Choctaw a little bit. We was in Muskogee going through newspapers on the Locke family. And here I find, back in the days of the early aviation, and here's a guy trying to make it over the Atlantic, like Charles Lindbergh did before him, And what this guy didn't make it, and all of a sudden, read a little bit further, there's a second one that wanted to do the same thing, just one story after another in there. And I've always regretted not taking down the information at the time, so it's hard to go back now to do that, but a lot of information. So.
Yeah, if you have time, you need all the time in the world, because you need to take down what you find when you find it, because that is one thing. The chances of getting back, if you continue on like we've done, it's either you narrow your research or you just continue on, but then you go back when you can, you have to. So.
Are you ready to say something?
Okay, I have another shout out for Gilcrease. I had mentioned my mother going to Wheelock and her stories. She had mentioned this pageant that they had in the 30s It was a reenactment of the Trail and Tears, and they had wagons that would come in, and she said it was so moving. And I had heard about this and heard about it. And over the years, we'd gone to visit some of her Gardner relatives, and they mentioned it. Yes, we loaned it to a museum. It was all written out how the play was to go, and we loaned it to a museum. So every time I would go to a place, I would ask about it, and no one had ever heard of it, and I'd never found anybody that had heard of it. Well, when we went to Gilcrease, they had a group of papers, the Gardner papers, and the majority of them were written by Edmund Gardner. He was a historian from Valiant, and they were there. It had a diagram. It had, it was more than just the procession of the wagons coming in. There was a speech by Pushmataha. There was a signing of the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. They had 7 little plays that they set on, and they had a diagram of how that was set up. And it was so exciting. Finally, 40, 50 years later, after Mother had first mentioned this, and it was acted in the 30s, I forgot which year, 35, I had found it. And so that's a group of papers that I copied, but there's a lot in there. There's a lot about the missionaries that were there. And he did research. He wrote about the Choctaw history. He wrote about the first immigration, the party that came there, who was in the group, Edwards, in time of the Civil War, and how he had left for California, and what went on during that time period. And I think the school was closed down. And it's just amazing. And so I love that. And well, also at Fort Smith, when we were looking at Trail of Tears documents too, the Grant Foreman, some of his papers were there, and that was fantastic. I'd like to do some more research on his, which I think are at a university up by Tulsa or at Tulsa. And let's see, there was another one I was going to mention that I'd like to see. Oh, yes, and I'm especially interested right now in pre-removal. So I'd like to see papers that have to do with that. And the archives, maybe, one day. I have been to the National Archives, and it is fantastic. It really is. If you think there's not any more left on Choctaw history, and there's tons, and microfilms, so much available on microfilm.
And at other universities.
Yes, and you're surprised, and that's one thing. If you're traveling around, like in Mississippi, stop at every little museum that you see, or if you can, or library. You might be really surprised at what they have, even if it's just one document. It can be very helpful or interesting. You'd be surprised. So yeah, that'd be my advice. Don't pass it by.
On one of our visits, and I suppose it was at OHS, I copied something on the early history of Spencer Academy. And the letters I was charmed with were written by a Mrs. Lee, who was the wife of a young teacher, and she tells about the life as it was, and they were there before the Civil War. And when the Civil War came along, they were sent somewhere to a mission farther north. But her letters were fascinating. And then I did a book called number 415, and it was letters of the chiefs from after the Civil War up until the early 1890s. Different chiefs along the way and what they were dealing with. A lot of it was about the Katy Railroad that was built through, and the people that were damaged along the way, their property was damaged. They were looking for some kind of recompense. And you know how that all went on. It just went on forever. And I don't know if they were ever compensated.
Yeah. I wanted
it was fun, interesting stuff. I'm not Choctaw, but I was born on Choctaw land, and I've known Choctaw people, and I have cousins that are Choctaw. So that's my story.
I think Kay is Choctaw. She's certainly adopted by us. And she knows so much, you know. To not listen to Kay would be just very foolish because she just knows so much about the Choctaws in southeastern Oklahoma, in our area. But I wanted to just add a little tiny story about what you may find and may not find. When you do genealogy, you have to have an open mind. You have to have an open mind. And at Gilcrease, well, first, my Thompson McKinney of the Journal, his father is McKinney, and I, for years, have been on a hunt for stuff about John McKinney. And I know some about him. He was chief in 1838 to 1842 of the Mush District. That's why we were roaming the cemetery in Howe. But anyways, I keep saying, you know, if you see anything with John McKinney, well, Kay finds this letter. And he wasn't referred to as John McKinney. It was, I think, Peter Pitchlin's father. Pitchlin's father writing a letter to Peter. And he was writing about the possible legal dealings that Whiskey McKinney would get his in trouble with. And I thought I was just going to die. I thought, here, you're looking for information about an ancestor, and you're, as everybody does, you're hoping for something wonderful, and you find out that running whiskey and bringing it into Indian territory, and he's not supposed to be. So anyways, you have to keep an open mind, you know, about these things. Because he eventually did end up chief, so I don't know. The in-between story is what we need to know. But you have to hunt for it. So.
They're all human.
So, what'd you say? Yeah. Okay, that's it. So, next. Gary?
Are we to me now? Okay.
Yeah. I'll shut
When
up.
I first started making these road trips, mainly to the Oklahoma City area, I didn't really specialize in anything other than helping them collect data. Okay, using whatever computer scanning tools we had to try to take imagery so we could take it back home and work on it. Well, after collecting this stuff with the rest of the crew, when I got back to looking at it, I realized I can't read cursive. I can't read this stuff that they had written down in here. There's no way I can transcribe this because I kept looking, Kate, what does this say? Kate, what does this say? And she'd tell me what it was, and I go, oh, okay, and go on from there. So I said, well, I got to do something else. And my interest has always been maps. Love maps. I said, I got map collections here. Let's look at maps. Okay, so I branched out just like Michael branched out in an area he found an interest in it. I found it in maps, and I worked, started looking for information I could find in general and then some specifics, because Ryan hopefully might talk about some of the map projects that he's been involved in, but he'd every once in a while come up and say, I'm working on this, and if you find anything information on this particular area, let me know. So when I started looking at some of these maps, some of the things that I started looking for were specific to projects that he might, be working on at the time of looking for information. And one of the fascinating trips for me I found was when we went back to the Sequoia Institute in Little Rock, and we talked with folks that were had detailed information on the routes that we migrated through Arkansas back in the 1830s when we came from Mississippi. And that was one of the projects that Ryan was working on, was an accurate migration routes for all of the Choctaw parties that came from Mississippi to Indian Territory. And so I started working those areas and found that a lot of good stuff, but a lot of the collections are duplicated too. So sometimes I'd find something unique, and sometimes I'd find, oh yeah, I saw that the other place, or I saw this at the other place. So it was kind of hit or miss at times, but that was a big boon for me. And I still can't read cursive.
I was just gonna jump in and say, after Ryan was he was this orchestrator and with the Light Horsemen, when I started, I thought the research group had always been a thing. And in truth it had, but now it was like this force, right? A team to be reckoned with. Quite impressive. But, going after the Light Horsemen, everyone was kind of like, well, what are we researching? What should we be looking for? What's the specialty? And they wanted to know, and they wanted to be really kind of honing in on things. But I think what we ended up doing after that was really looking at all different archives and just like visiting different archives and what's the strength of the collection there and looking at that. And then, and then everyone had their own individual interests. And then there's someone like me who's kind of like, I'm interested, but, I didn't have a specialty. So I would just, when I was visiting archives, I would just kind of try to find stuff and scan things, because you never know what's going to be useful later for someone else with a specific project. And so I was just kind of more like a glorified scanner, trying to digitize things that hopefully someday would become useful. And so I think, one, that's like an encouragement if you don't have a specific project, that there's like lots of stories that you can find or that could be useful for different reasons down the road. And when I do like research, a lot of times it's digital, and it's because I have access to things because people did that before, right? They digitize a book that then is now like accessible online. So I think the only problem with that is now we have just like as much work to go through all of the things that we've collected over time and trying to sort all of that. So all that to say that just like there's always exciting projects, but you never know what you'll find in the archive, and then you don't know 10 years down the road how that's going to be useful to someone, or who's going to pop up in that document that somebody's working on. So that's exciting. It's the adventure of it.
And then one of those trips we lost Jennifer to this massive artwork collection that they had at the Sequoia National Research Center there in Little Rock. Like, just guy happened to come in that owned the collection, opened the door, and it was just like, bam, it was a contemporary native artwork collection. It was amazing. And like, we just lost Jennifer for the day. She was gone. We're like, all right, we'll keep trucking and we'll find her later.
There's something for everyone in the archives.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of good stuff. Yeah, I think, I didn't know Francine before I started my archival research. And so I had spent a lot of time in the Victor Locke Jr. papers and his friend Patrick Hurley's papers. And then so I like have all these letters that Victor Locke wrote to his friends, and now Francine can have them once I like organize them, which is always like half the battle of like putting things together in appropriate PDF files and whatnot. But it's really like fun. And we always joke about how Sandra has collected so many things, and her house is just overfilled with papers because she's made photocopies of stuff. And so like of all the things she's collected over her life, and we're like, the next archive we go to should be Sandra's house.
It's weird to go there, huh? Take it all away.
But yeah, there's just kind of just really so much stuff. And so I would love to hear kind of, since you guys have kind of been doing this for so long, what are your fondest memories working as the research group, or on any of the trips you've kind of gone on or anything?
I think part of my fondest memory is all the choices of food that Jennifer has made.
I've never seen someone eat so such a beautiful thing. Kay can eat soup like no one else. It's a great time.
Just food.
Yeah, I must say the gourmet trips were an experience. And every time we would travel to different places, there are restaurants that I never would have thought of going to eat that I did go to eat and actually found something that I liked. So thank you, Jennifer.
Gotta fuel the research with good.
Yeah, I was going to say, archives come in all shapes and sizes. So, let's see, what's I was going to say for a fun thing, it wasn't fun for you guys, but remember the first trip to OHS and trying to find that restaurant. Here it is, food again. Remember, we went around in circles.
Flip.
Oh, they're telling.
Flip.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the right
Yeah.
name of it?
It
Flip.
was.
I think Flip's Italian. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Well, we ended up going back there several times once we found it.
Yeah, once we found it, we went back. So, but just the camaraderie, and like I think it was someone said, Kay said, they're all like family. It's just like family. We just have a good time when we're out, and we get all excited about something we find that we didn't expect to find, and we're just clicking away, copying.
One of the things that we didn't touch on earlier too is another kind of semi-project that we got involved in, that Ryan's had this ongoing thing of collecting GIS data points for anything related to Choctaw culture. And we went on a couple of field trips in southeast Oklahoma on several occasions to look for different things, and crawled in some briars in some places, and other places, were a lot easier to get into. But there were two things that stuck out in my mind that I had never seen or experienced before, that I got, finally was able to see and learn about. And one of them were grave houses on Choctaw graves. And I saw my first one down in McCurtain County on one of those trips. And then the other thing for me that was kind of special too was to find out a little bit of history about bells with churches in the area that had been brought from Mississippi when they moved. A congregation left Mississippi and brought their bell with it to build their new church and establish it there. And some of those bells are still there to this day. And I was very impressed with that. So we've had a lot of different things that we've delved into besides just going to archives and such. We've gotten outdoors a little bit too and looked at some places there. And I think it's been a well-rounded experience for all of us to learn a lot of new things along those, and there's still a lot to do.
Yeah, we've watched Ryan collect cane seeds, was it, Ryan? Remember the hunt for cane?
Yep. Oh yeah, there's always a hunt for cane.
Well, we did that too on our trip to Daisy. Jumbo Road and went over to Daisy. We stopped at places where there was cane.
Yeah. I remember we'd be driving and Kay would be like, oh, over here, so-and-so lived, and then there was a house over here, and I'm like, River Cane, pull over. And then I'm running down the embankment, GPS unit. But yeah, if you guys know any locations of River Cane, send them my way. We're doing a River Cane research project.
And grave sites in fields or off the beaten path. We've done a lot of.
I think of the grave site it's got the little shelters just outside Antlers, I think. I keep telling Fran, I don't think you've ever seen it.
I don't think I've ever seen it. I'll have to make it.
4 or 5 graves there. It's got the little shelters on just outside Antlers.
Oh.
He must have been wandering down a road if not found it.
Right off.
I got to say, this is one of my funny stories, and I'll keep it. There's a lot more to this story, but I'll keep it short. Me and my stories. But we were out. This is the proto research group. So this is before it all kind of accumulated together. But we were in the van, which maybe you'll hear another story about. Oh, this white van, it's gone everywhere. It's transported March Madness kids, stickball players, researchers. But we were out and about GPSing some headstones, and David was with us.
Yeah.
And the landowner says, "Oh, you guys can hop in the back of the gator with us." So everyone's in the gator, and David and I hop in the back in the bed of the gator. And I'm a big guy, and I'm trying to move around and get comfy as this thing's just riding through this pasture. And what I didn't realize is I pushed a piece of barbed wire into the gas can, and it started leaking gas. And on our way back, I was like, "Man, that sure is. We must be hitting a lot of water." I said, "My pants are pretty wet." And I looked down, and they are just covered in gasoline, just covered, right? And it started burning. It was burning. I was like, "Oh no, oh no." So I waited until we got to the next stop, and the group took off. And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna stay behind. I got some emails or stuff I have to do." And there I am on the side of the road, the doors propped open, pants off, trying to rinse the pants off with water, and trying to rinse my legs off with water. And I was before I married my wife, when I was dating her, I called her sister at the time was living with her mom. So I called her sister out of the blue. I'm like, "Hey, I need to use your shower," because they live nearby in Antlers. We were up in Daisy, and next thing you know, the game of telephone started going between the family. That Ryan was swinging by the house, and all sorts of drama. It was great. But so then I didn't have a change of clothes, so I'm wearing my boots, and the only shorts I could find were actually my mother-in-law has some athletic shorts, so I was wearing those. And I went to buy a shirt at Travel Plaza, and I wasn't paying attention, and I said, "Oh, well, if I'm going to buy a shirt, I'm going to buy a shirt I'm going to wear." So I grabbed one, and it was one of the, when the Choctaw T-shirts first came out, and I grabbed one of those and put it on, and then I got to looking at it, and I grabbed the wrong one, and I got the one with the ruffles. So I was wearing the ruffle shirt, and I was wearing some athletic shorts and some boots, and I came walking in the door when I got home, and Thea's like, "What is wrong with you? Like, what is going on?" Like, it was, one of my favorite research trips. Oh, my legs hurt for a few days, but chemical burns eventually, healed up. It was good. Good times. Good times.
The picture won't heal though.
Your psyche is burnt forever. Sound.
Well, research comes in all shapes, sizes, and forms. But he's talking about that van, and the first time out in the van, I wasn't along, but Gary and Kay were, and they couldn't climb up into the van. So everybody has Ryan to thank for going and getting a mounting stool? Mounting stool that's now, required piece of research material.
Sure.
If we're using the van.
If we're using the van.
It's a mounting stool for getting on horses. And I stopped by Tractor Supply, and I said, maybe they'll have a step stool or something. And it works. It's heavy. It doesn't move.
Right. We're safe.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a lot of fun with a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. I mean,
when we go out on these trips, we do put in long days. We stay until the archives close.
So they throw us out.
Split.
Literally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're there when they open, and we stay until they close.
I know, and we make them work the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sort of.
Well, the collections too. We have them running around for us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, at Gilcrease. Remember, we went to see the pipe from Dancing Rabbit Creek.
Oh yeah, the Dancing Rabbit Creek treaty pipe. Yeah, that pipe's pretty cool. It's Greenwood LaFleur used it at the treaty grounds, but the pipe is Mississippian in nature, so it may be an older pipe that may have been passed down for several generations.
It looks that way.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Because Greenwood used it, I kept joking about smashing it, and the archivists were freaking out.
They were very kind to pull it out for us on 2 different occasions for large groups of people And the first time, very short notice. So
Yeah.
we're very grateful for good relationships with our archival and museum institutions.
Yeah.
I don't think we've run into a bad institution yet. They've all been really great to work with and very interested and
willing to pull records out for you and even suggest, things that you should look at, So we have our list for of course, I agree. Our first road trip should be to Sandra's house.
It's the perfect segue into, in addition to always be really nice to your archivist, if you spend like 6 months at an archive, bring donuts on your last day for your assistants. They will love you. But what is some advice that you would give to people who are watching, who want to learn more about their family histories? So what advice would you have for those people?
I would say start with your current generation. When you're take genealogy and the National Genealogical Society, they always say start with the people you have around you, and certainly especially if it's your parents, you might get away with it. Do you have any records I might be interested in? Sometimes that's kind of a funny question, but because people don't want to tell you, but just keep persisting. I know Kay says persistence, and in my opinion, keep an open mind. Keep a real open mind, and always remember. Some of my advice is that names are always spelled more than once. Names actually, you find in research. I learned a long time ago, especially with naturalization records, people write a name down how they hear it. Yes, especially 100 years ago. It's how they hear the name, and that's how they write it. So you can never say, oh, but I know it's spelled this way. It's, you always have to have an open mind. And the man that I took a class with when I very first started said, actually, everything you find with that name, in any of its forms, you write down. And Kay says to me, but Francine Brown, that's her maiden name. It's kind of like Smith. I say, well, all I can tell you is what he said. So luckily I didn't have that problem with Locke, But now Bray, I think, is a little bit bad with that. Lots of Brays running around. Especially when you find them in Oklahoma and you're thinking the only place you're going to find them is Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. Oklahoma. Who went to Oklahoma? Of the Brays. So they're not Indians, that's for sure. But but those are, I guess, and learn what you can. Learn what you can. I know I've been a follower of the National Genealogical Society for years, probably since the early 70s, because that's who I took classes with in the beginning, was one of the researchers with them, and have learned a lot, just a whole lot through that. So, and be nice to your archivist. Be real nice to your archivist. They'll do anything for you if you're nice to them. So, okay, somebody else's turn.
If you do paper research, you got to keep track of what paper you're in and what dates you're sitting on,
Oh.
If you see a one-line mention, for instance, Charlie Archer just came in on the train for a few days, and that's all there was, one line. So I wrote that down. That name meant something to me. So I make sure the date's in there and everything, so I can find it again if I have to. Here, weeks later, I find Charlie Archer married, in my land, whoever thought that that would happen, but you have to know keep track of your dates and everything, know where you're getting your information from. But if you just know it's there, that doesn't mean anything to anybody. So, but if you can go back and find it again, it may mean more.
You can get the whole article. Yeah, because it turned out Charlie Archer married my great aunt.
A lot of times, though, you just get the one line. That's all there is. There's no more to it.
But a lot of little one lines add up to information later on if you keep track of them. And that's kind of important. I
Well,
might just add one thing for me, not growing up in a Choctaw oriented family when I was young. So I didn't get oral histories. I didn't get a lot of information along those lines from the family. So I was like starting and do family Choctaw research at a later age. If you are fortunate enough to be in that environment and you're still young when they're alive, because I missed out talking to my grandparents about those sorts of things, aunts and uncles that I could have learned a lot from that I didn't do. And now here that I want that information, it's long gone. So hopefully somebody in your family somewhere who's still young has an interest in this sort of thing and will spend the time to talk to your elders and learn from them while they're still here to be able to give you that information. And there's a lot of information out there we're losing every day as elders pass on that nobody's out there collecting. And it's really a shame.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
One thing I would say, Myrtle Edmond, one of our longtime volunteers, was buried this past Monday, but she told me a story a long time ago. She was working on her husband's family and trying to find an obituary or some, a death record. And finally in the newspaper, she found a little note. Mrs. Davis died at Edge's Sawmill last week or something to that effect. So she was able to put a time frame into the time of this person's death. And that's the kind of thing that you have to use. Not everybody got a tombstone, and not very few got death records in the earlier times. So you find this information wherever you can, and you have to piece it together, just like a jigsaw puzzle.
And for Choctaw research, I would suggest the Pioneer Papers, and they have an index, but the more you read, not everybody in that article is an index. So they say, oh, we live next door to so-and-so, and we would go there with them to town. They did this, they did that. So there could be more people in that article than just what's in the index. And the Dawes files and folders and those interviews are really interesting. The original Enrollee book has a lot of genealogy and history in those. So those are a few of the. I started off with Cushman's, the history of Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Natchez. But that was the first book I could find way back when. But it's interesting, and it has families in it. So yeah, those are easy to get to. Oh, and on microfilm, the county court records have not been transcribed. I mean, they're hard to read, but they need to be transcribed. Okay. But they've got a lot of interesting information.
Well, Family Search has put a lot of stuff like that online.
Yeah, you can get the microfilms, and you can get that, but they're not
No,
transcribed.
but you can get it online.
Yeah.
The document is
Yes,
there. You
yes.
just have to try to transcribe it yourself.
Yeah, we didn't mention Family Search.
And
They got everything.
old records are hard, even if Gary can't read cursive.
It's worth it. It's worth it. Some of them you can read.
So yeah, there's a lot of great tools out there. The Pioneer Papers, the Chronicles of Oklahoma, FamilySearch.org is a great place that you can do some research. And if you need help with genealogy, you can also contact them, and they can.
It's free
they have
too.
local
Family Search
places
is
everywhere.
free.
You can sit down and work with them, and they're free. Of course, Ancestry has a lot of information. Newspapers.com has a lot of information, but both those have to have subscriptions. I would say definitely get in touch with your local genealogical society, historical society, library, or in case for Kay and Francine, they have the depot. So the Antlers Depot. What's the official name for that?
Pushmataha County Historical Society.
Oh, okay. So the Historical Society's there in the depot, and then You know, McAllister, they have a genealogical society there in town, and there's just different places that you can go and talk with these people, but it's more than just talking. It's about being involved in that community. You know, and it's great to do this research, and it's great to, you know, get all this information. But something that I want to, you know, kind of push towards for everyone to think about is how can you take this information and make it accessible to your community members so that it's useful to them, you know, because that's what, you know, like for instance, that's one thing that we're fighting with Sandra's house. She's collected all this stuff over the years, and it's just this great amount of information. But now we're in this, you know, digital age, and we want to take all that information that she has been gathering and make it accessible to everyone. And, you know, so I always urge you, you know, to think about how these things can really help other people. And, you know, if there's anything, if you have any documents or any research or anything that you want to share, you know, the Historic Preservation Department's open and, you know, to take that and make digital copies and backups and then be able to make that accessible to our tribal members. Mm-hmm. So we're always open to do that.
I would add,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to say I'd add, this may sound kind of like, but I've since the 90s probably had to help clear four to five relatives' houses. And you cannot imagine how easy it is for the wrong person to come in and pull up a dumpster to your grandmother's house, your cousin's house, and just feel very strongly that the best thing to do is to put it all in the dumpster. Who would want this information? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. You know, who would ever be interested in her stuff? And then when you do get access to it and find out, you know, I've called myself an archives hugger because of saving these things. And you just can't believe what you find when you do find it, you know. And so, you know, my thing is figure out where it's going to go and start getting it there, you know. For me, that's the way I look at it. Because I have a cousin who was a historian and had a cousin in Tennessee, and when she died, she had left everything to a museum, a very small museum, and when she died, they just felt that it wasn't something they could keep, and that the house had been empty for a long, long time, so they felt it was just in such bad shape, and they filled I found out later they filled 5 dumpsters with paper. And, you know, so it's something that I think about a lot because I've experienced it, you know. So luckily I hugged my folks' papers and my dad's cousin and just said, I don't care what you think, they go to my house. So I was able, for my group, to save most of the family papers, you know. And Michael already knows what I'm, you know, planning to do, so, with him. But you throw away history, and we don't want to throw away history.
I have a great example of a wonderful researcher, someone that has dedicated, the last 10, 12, 15 years of their life doing research and trying to put it all together for Choctaw people. This book right here, Choctaw Foods.
Hurrah.
Backwards. But, Ian's done all this research on Choctaw history and culture, put it all together into this foods book. So, the whole point of the book is on Choctaw food, but, half the book is just Choctaw history and culture to get that foundation to be able to even talk about the food. And we used to joke for years, we're like, man, we need to get all this stuff out of Ian's head. How do we do it? And, we helped him give we helped as much as we can to give him time to write a book. It took him a couple of years, but that's one great way that we're able to get this information out. And I'm just so excited that Ian and the tribe work together on this, because if you need to know, if you want to learn anything about Choctaw history and culture, that's it right there. It's Choctaw foods. The Choctaw store is actually sold out of the original book, so we're going to have to start running a new version to print. But Wheelock and the Choctaw Nation Capitol Museum still have plenty of copies. Call there. Yeah.
Okay, that was perfect ending. So we are out of time for today. So Yakuki to everyone, all of our researchers, our research group. This office has benefited so much from all of the knowledge that you have and all of your work and the time that you kind of spent into it, and that the community itself has also benefits from that, and so we're really thankful for that. And so our next Chata Tisholi is going to be on April 1st at 1 p.m. and our Chata Tisholi is going to be Miss Dora Wixon. She is a translation specialist for Chata Anumpa Aikana. So she is a first language speaker, and she's going to be kind of sharing what it was like for her growing up and being a first language speaker, and what she kind of does as a translation specialist working at the School of Choctaw Language. So I look forward to seeing everyone there. And Shipisilachiki, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.